long as they are operating in international waters, as frankly we do around the world, and are behaving in a responsible way, they are certainly free to do so, and it doesn't cause any alarm within this building. While it is interesting and noteworthy that they are in this part of the world, it doesn't pose any threat, and it doesn't cause any concern.
That was the Pentagon's press secretary saying that the Russian subs off the U.S. coast are not a threat. Now, if the subs were not here to do harm, then what in the world were they doing here in the first place?
Dr. Stephen Flanagan has the answers. He's the Senior Vice President of the Center for Strategic and International Studies. He joins us this morning. Good morning to you, Doctor. So what were, in fact, these Russian submarines doing, and how close were they to our borders?
Well, as this Pentagon spokesman mentioned, they were off in the international waters, so probably out beyond the 200-mile limit. I think this was mostly political posturing. It's rather a dismaying sign that the Russians haven't quite reset their own mindset, and the feeling that as President Obama tried to open the door to a new relationship, and even in his speech in Moscow, asked for Russia to kind of abandon this kind of behavior, the Russians are showing that they haven't quite yet given up on this idea that, well, if you want to mess around in our backyard in Georgia and the Caucasus, well, we can continue to mess around in your backyard.
Well, this is concerning to me, and some of the stuff that I was studying about this was fascinating, and some of these maneuvers that they do, I want to get into some of the details of this because this really hasn't been talked about, which is that these nuclear subs sitting there and on these maneuvers, what are they doing? They're basically waiting for orders as part of their maneuvers to launch nuclear warheads. Now, obviously, they're not doing that, but this is part of their maneuvers, isn't it?
Well, it is, but I mean, we all, both the United States and the Russians, still have many ballistic missile and cruise missile. This is a cruise missile carrying submarine, an air-breathing nuclear missile. We're not sure that those submarines are armed with nuclear weapons. I don't know, but the fact is that these are systems that were designed to track U.S. submarines and surface warfare vessels, and to look for opportunities if there were a conflict to obviously attack enemy hostile ships. But I don't think this is necessarily a hostile gesture. As the Russian defense spokesman said the other day, they're out on patrols. This is something that both sides do, and as long as we're not interfering with operations or doing anything menacing, this is part of the old cat and mouse game, unfortunately, that we used to play.
Here's what I have a problem with. As a student of history, and you see what happened during the Cuban Missile Crisis, right? The Russians had, of course, missiles pointed at the United States in Cuba. Now, if the Russians working with Cuba have these subs in Cuban waters, how is this any different? I mean, we cited the Monroe Doctrine as a reason to keep European powers out of Western waters. How is this any different? As you say, these relationships seem to be a little strained.
Well, it's a little more complicated than that. I mean, the Monroe Doctrine applies to establishing spheres of influence and an enduring presence. But the fact is, as the Pentagon spokesman said, the Russians are operating international waters. We operate in international waters off the coast of many different countries, including Russia, with our submarines and other vessels. We're watching what goes on as a way to enhance our own security. I mean, the Russians, I don't think this is a threatening gesture. I think this is a political gesture. This is essentially saying, we're back, we're able to project power at some distance, and don't forget that we're still a formidable power. It has to do more with Putin's showing his pecs the other day than it does military threats.
And taking his shirts off.
And maybe answering those comments from Joe Biden. Stephen Flanagan, we appreciate your time this morning.
Okay, surely. Thank you, gentlemen. Happy to join you.
Well, coming up here on the show, we're going to talk to a Canadian businessman who makes money from people stuck on those waiting lists who pay him